Karoline Leavitt stood by the frosted window of her West Wing office, her eyes tracing the Capitol dome under the winter gray. The building was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday. For months, she'd worked tirelessly as the face of the administration, handling press briefings, crushing hostile interviews, and rising as a rare Gen Z voice with discipline and bite. But that morning, something felt off. Her aide, Brian, entered without knocking, which meant only one thing: a problem. "Karoline, you need to see this," he said, holding out his phone. The headline was from The Hill. "GOP Senator. Leavitt's loyalty to Trump is unprofessional, dangerous." She narrowed her eyes. "Who?" Brian hesitated. "Romney." Karoline blinked. Not just a throwaway comment. It was a quote, direct and deliberate. Mitt Romney, longtime critic of Trump, had named her personally, said she was too young to understand restraint and using the press room like a campaign stage. It wasn't the first time a Republican criticized her, but it was the first time one tried to discredit her role, publicly and from within the party. She set the phone down. "So now I'm the problem," she muttered. That afternoon, the whispers thickened. Staffers avoided eye contact. A planned meeting with Senate leadership was postponed. Brian confirmed what she already suspected. Romney was working the back channels, framing her as a liability ahead of the next press cycle. Karoline paced her office, fury in her chest but clarity in her mind. "He thinks I'll back off," she said. "He's betting I'll just fade." Brian nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" She turned to him, her voice like steel. "I'm going to do what they hate the most. Speak in front of every camera in the room." That night, Trump called her from Mar-a-Lago. "You see Romney's little stunt?" he asked. "I did," she said coolly. "You gonna let him get away with it?" She smirked. "I'll see him at tomorrow's press conference." Trump laughed. "That's why I hired you. Hit hard. Smile after." As she hung up, Karoline sat back in her chair. She wasn't just planning a response, she was planning a reckoning. The next morning, the White House press briefing room was buzzing before 9 a.m. The usual crowd of reporters had doubled. Rumors were flying. Karoline Leavitt was planning a response to Senator Mitt Romney's remarks, and insiders said it wouldn't be subtle. Backstage, Karoline stood alone in front of the mirror, straightening her navy blazer. The silver cross necklace around her neck caught a glint of light, and she paused to touch it. Not out of superstition, but out of intention. She wasn't just stepping up to a microphone. She was stepping into fire. Brian entered holding a slim black folder. "The packet is ready. Everything's sourced, footnoted, fact-checked 3 times. Karoline nodded. "Good. If he's going to throw me under the bus, I'm going to show the whole country who's driving it." The press room doors opened. Reporters turned as she stepped into the lights. Calm, collected, unreadable. Flashes popped. She walked straight to the podium, placing the folder carefully beside her notes. She adjusted the mic. "Before we begin with today's scheduled briefings," she said, her voice steady and cool, "I want to address a statement made by Senator Mitt Romney regarding my service to the American people." Cameras snapped to full focus. Reporters leaned forward. "Senator Romney believes I am too young, too loyal, too aligned with President Trump," she continued. "But what Senator Romney calls loyalty, I call integrity. What he calls unprofessional, I call constitutional clarity. And today, I've brought receipts." A few murmurs rippled through the room. Karoline opened the folder. "I've compiled a record of Senator Romney's public positions versus his private correspondence with White House officials over the last 6 months. Yes, including emails." Reporters froze. A few gasped. "This isn't about vengeance. This is about transparency," she said. "Because when a sitting U.S. senator tries to smear a public servant for doing her job, the American people deserve to know why." Back in the Capitol, Romney was mid-call when the news alert hit. Leavitt opens briefing with Romney expose. "I brought receipts." He lowered his phone. "She wouldn't dare," he muttered. But she already had. The press room fell into a strange, electrified silence. Karoline flipped the folder open with composure, not showmanship. There was no dramatic flourish, just an eerie calm that made it more unnerving. She held up the first page. "This is a transcript of a closed-door meeting from 4 months ago," she began. Senator Romney expressed support for the president's border security initiatives, calling them, and I quote, "effective and necessary for long-term safety." A reporter raised a hand. "Then why?" Karoline continued without missing a beat. "Did he go on national television last week and call the same policy inhumane and short-sighted? Was it political convenience or something else?" She placed the page on the podium. Flashes erupted from cameras as murmurs grew louder. Karoline lifted another document. This email exchange, dated just 2 weeks ago, shows Senator Romney personally requesting access to classified immigration briefings from the Office of Legislative Affairs. In his request, he states the administration's policies deserve thoughtful Republican reinforcement. A ripple of stunned glances passed between reporters. One whispered. Karoline leaned slightly toward the microphone, her voice sharper now. "Senator Romney doesn't think I'm unprofessional because I do my job. He's upset because I don't play his game. The game where you smile in the meeting, then stab someone on air. I don't play that game." Inside his office in the Senate building, Mitt Romney stared at a TV muted in disbelief. His aides stood still. One offered weakly, "Should we respond?" Romney exhaled through his nose. "Not yet. She's bluffing." But he wasn't sure. Back in the press room, Karoline wasn't done. "These attacks on me are not about age. They're about threat. I'm a threat to the way things used to work. Backroom deals, double faces, and insider politics. If speaking plainly and standing for my president makes me a target, then I wear that as a badge of honor." For a moment, no one said a word. Then, someone in the back clapped once, then again. Soon, several more followed. It wasn't a political endorsement. It was respect. Karoline looked out across the sea of lenses and journalists and spoke once more. "I didn't come here to survive this job. I came here to clean it up." An hour later, the clip of Karoline's press conference had already spread across every major outlet. CNN aired it on repeat. Fox News played it with triumphant music. Even Politico labeled the moment, "Leavitt goes live and unloads." Inside the Capitol, Romney's office moved fast. A polished statement hit reporters' inboxes by 3 p.m. Senator Romney respects the work of all public servants. However, Ms. Leavitt's behavior today reflects a troubling disregard for institutional protocol and professionalism. The senator has no interest in petty drama, only in restoring dignity to public discourse. The message was crafted to sound above it all, like a father scolding a rebellious teen. But the public wasn't buying it. Karoline didn't issue a rebuttal. She didn't need to. The facts were out. Instead, she returned to her office and pulled down the blinds. For a few minutes, she just stood by the window, eyes fixed on the city skyline. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but she ignored it. Brian stepped in cautiously. Romney responded. She nodded. "I saw." "He called you petty." Karoline turned to him with a dry smile. "Good. That means he doesn't know what's coming next." That evening, at a conservative women's summit in Arlington, she walked on stage without notes. The room wasn't filled with staffers or insiders. It was teachers, nurses, moms, college students, people who'd seen the clip and wanted more. Karoline took the mic. "They don't care about truth," she said. "They care about control. And when someone like me refuses to be controlled, they label her emotional, dangerous, naive." A pause. "Mitt Romney tried to define me, so today I defined him." Applause surged, not polite, thunderous. The next morning, "Define Romney" trended nationwide. Users posted memes of Karoline holding up documents. One went viral. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the stakes. Romney's team scrambled. Internally, even some GOP colleagues were whispering, maybe it's time he sat this one out. But Karoline wasn't celebrating. She was preparing, because she knew what came next. When you challenge power, real, entrenched power, it doesn't retreat. It reloads. 2 days later, an encrypted message from the RNC appeared in Karoline's inbox. The subject line was vague. Strategic coordination briefing. Attendance requested. She didn't need to guess. This wasn't coordination. It was containment. The location. A private conference room in a discreet office building near Capitol Hill. No press, no phones, no aides. Just the party's highest-ranking operators and the unmistakable whiff of damage control. Karoline arrived alone, in a dark blazer and low heels, calm as ever. As she stepped through the heavy door, heads turned. At the table sat Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, House Speaker Mike Johnson, a few senior committee chairs, and, of course, Mitt Romney. He didn't rise. He didn't look at her, but the corners of his mouth were tight, as if clenched in anticipation. McConnell began without small talk. Karoline, we appreciate your commitment to the movement, but your recent media moments have raised concerns. She tilted her head. Concerns? Or conflicts? He gave a practiced chuckle. Both. Romney finally spoke, his tone clipped. This isn't about ideology. It's about decorum. You crossed a line. Broadcasting internal communications? That's not how we conduct ourselves. Karoline didn't blink. Senator, I didn't cross a line. I erased one, between what the people are told and what you all say in private. Johnson leaned in. You're a rising star, Karoline, but if you want longevity in this game, you have to be strategic. Right now, you're making noise, not policy. Karoline folded her hands. Funny. I thought truth was a strategy. Romney scoffed. You think you're untouchable because the base likes you? Let me remind you, we write the rules of this party. The room went cold, and then Karoline stood. She didn't shout. She didn't waver. She placed both palms flat on the polished oak table and looked Romney dead in the eyes. With all due respect, she said quietly, you don't write anything anymore. The base does, and they're done with the doublespeak. A pause. Her voice sharpened. You don't scare me, Senator. And if this meeting was meant to intimidate me, you should have sent someone who still has influence. Romney leaned back, clearly stunned. McConnell raised a hand to speak, but Karoline was already walking toward the door. Before exiting, she turned and left them with a final line. You can try to sideline me, but I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to end it. Outside, the wind bit at her blazer. Her phone buzzed. Messages from supporters, journalists, even a quiet text from someone inside the meeting. You didn't blink. They did. Karoline slipped her phone into her pocket. Game on. By sunrise the next morning, the political temperature in D.C. had changed. Karoline's line from the meeting, you don't write anything anymore, the base does, had been leaked, anonymously. But it didn't take a genius to guess who had dropped it. Rumors swirled that one of the junior RNC advisors texted it to a Hill journalist before Karoline's heels had even hit the sidewalk. The quote hit X like a hammer. She said what we've all been thinking. Karoline just declared war on the GOP elite. Not a puppet, not a politician, a reckoning. Even some MAGA-aligned politicians retweeted it. Kari Lake, Lauren Boebert, and even Donald Trump Jr. posted supportive comments praising Karoline for saying out loud what the party needed to hear for years. By noon, Fox News ran a full segment titled Leavitt versus the Establishment, Who's Really Running the GOP? Romney's office remained silent. Back inside her White House office, Karoline sat with Brian, her aide, watching cable news cycle her quote on loop. They're turning it into a movement, he said quietly. She nodded. Good. Because that's what it is. He hesitated. You know what comes next, right? She turned toward him, calm but firm. Yeah, retaliation. And it came fast. By Friday, an op-ed appeared in the Washington Post, unsigned but clearly sourced from Capitol insiders. It accused Karoline of grandstanding, of cherry-picking documents, and of weaponizing her youth to mask inexperience. The piece didn't challenge the facts she'd revealed. It questioned her right to reveal them at all. The media's left leaned in gleefully. But the GOP's old guard, their silence was deafening and revealing. Trump, meanwhile, remained oddly quiet. No tweet, no call. Until 9:04 p.m., when he posted on Truth Social, "Karoline Leavitt is a fighter. They don't like her because she tells the truth. Very proud. Tremendous future." The message exploded across conservative spaces. Karoline's follower count surged. Donations to a PAC she'd been affiliated with spiked by 600% in one night. But she didn't celebrate. She was already thinking 5 moves ahead. The next morning, a message came from a source inside Romney's circle. "He's working on a counterattack, going after your credibility. He's digging." Karoline read the text twice, then looked up at Brian. "Let him dig," she said. "I already planted the truth." Monday morning started with a headline bombshell from the New York Times. Leaked email shows Karoline Leavitt sought political favors from GOP donors. The article quoted fragments from a supposed internal email written by Karoline months earlier, allegedly requesting donor introductions in exchange for long-term access. Romney's team stayed officially quiet, but unnamed sources familiar with Senate communications fed it just enough oxygen to catch fire. By noon, MSNBC was calling it a young scandal in the making. The View labeled her a climbing operative pretending to be authentic. Even some moderate conservatives issued a cautious, if true. Karoline sat with Brian in silence, rereading the article. "It's heavily redacted," Brian said. "They're hiding something." Karoline didn't flinch. "They're hiding the full email." Brian blinked. "You think you know what it is?" She nodded slowly. "I wrote it. I remember the real subject line." Hours later, she strode into the briefing room without warning. No schedule, no PR heads up, just Karoline, a hard copy of the full email, and a fierce calm behind her eyes. The cameras snapped on instinct. She walked to the podium and held up the paper. "I want to thank the media for giving me a reason to show the full context," she began, tone sharp but composed. "This is the entire email," she said, holding it closer. "Unedited. You'll see it's not about pay for access. It's about connecting conservative college students to mentoring programs, including donor-funded ones, so they can enter public service." She paused, locking eyes with the CNN reporter in the front row. "Do you know who else was CC'd on this email?" she asked. "Senator Mitt Romney's chief of staff." Gasps rippled through the room. Karoline continued, flipping to the second page. "And do you know who replied, approving the idea and suggesting a contact list? That same office. I brought those emails too." She laid them out one by one. One reporter whispered, "Oh my God." Karoline straightened up. What was framed as a scandal was actually a mentorship initiative. What was edited was the truth, and what they tried to use against me proves they were on board from the start. Romney's team watched from a Capitol office, speechless. "She flipped it," one aide muttered. "She brought the receipts again." Romney didn't respond. He simply walked to the window and stared out, silent. Back at the White House, Karoline left the press room without another word. She didn't need a closing line this time. The silence said it all. The next morning, Karoline's office phone rang before sunrise. It wasn't from a reporter. It wasn't from Trump. It was from a 2028 presidential hopeful, a sitting senator who had once refused to share a stage with her, now asking for coffee and common ground. Brian raised an eyebrow as she hung up. "They're turning." Karoline didn't smile. "They're hedging," he chuckled. "Well, they're hedging in your direction." By midday, Fox News aired a full breakdown of the email scandal, or what was now widely referred to as Romney's failed takedown. A side-by-side display of the original leak and Karoline's full document ran on screen with a banner headline, "The Gen Z press secretary who outsmarted the establishment again." Breitbart ran a story titled, "Romney Blew It." Karoline rose. Even outlets like Axios and Politico conceded the obvious. Leavitt's clarity and receipts disarmed the attack. A masterclass in narrative control. But the most unexpected endorsement came from a voice that had remained silent until now. That night, during a rally in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump paused mid-speech, grinned toward the camera, and said, "Karoline Leavitt, I'm telling you folks, she's not just tough, she's brilliant. When the swamp tried to sink her, she drained them first. She's got guts, she's got brains, and she's got America on her side." The crowd erupted. Karoline watched it live from her apartment, her silver cross catching the light on the coffee table. Her phone vibrated so fast it nearly fell off the edge. One text stood out. "Think about running. You'd win." From a major conservative strategist. She stared at it for a moment. Running? She hadn't even finished her first term as press secretary, but the thought wasn't foreign anymore. Meanwhile, on the Hill, Romney was quiet, publicly silent, internally irritated. He met with two senior advisors late that night behind closed doors. One of them, a long-serving committee chair, finally said it plainly, "She's not a distraction anymore, Mitt. She's a movement." Romney said nothing, just tapped his pen once, then again, then again. The sound of relevance slipping. Back in the West Wing, Karoline walked alone into the empty press room. She stood at the podium for a moment, staring into the quiet sea of empty seats. "I'm not done," she whispered. "Not even close." Then she turned, heels echoing, and walked back into the light. By Thursday, something shifted. Karoline could feel it in the questions at the briefing room, in the phone calls from party leaders who once ignored her, and most of all, in the silence from Mitt Romney. Too silent. She knew the establishment. When they go quiet, it's never peace. It's plotting. Brian rushed into her office midday, holding his phone like it was radioactive. "Karoline, you need to see this." He handed it over. On screen, a tweet from a D.C. insider known for leaking Republican back-channel moves. Sources: Romney's team prepared to release former internal memos questioning Karoline Leavitt's national security judgment. Developing. Karoline stared at the screen, unmoved. "National security judgment?" Brian nodded. "Remember that Homeland Security briefing you challenged 6 months ago?" She did. She had raised red flags on a rushed policy draft and recommended a rewrite. It was unpopular, but within her role. If anything, it had strengthened the plan. "They're trying to flip it," she said. "Make it sound like I interfered." Brian looked tense. "They're calling it reckless influence. They think they've got something." Karoline stood slowly and walked to the window, eyes narrowing. "Good," she said. "Let them come." That night, the story dropped. The Washington Examiner ran with the headline, "Leavitt undermined DHS proposal, sources say, party leaders worried." The article quoted anonymous intelligence staffers and a concerned senator. No names, no proof, just shadows and slander. Karoline didn't flinch. She went live. Again. She stood at the podium the next morning, holding 2 folders. "One," she said, raising her right hand, "is the original DHS proposal, which, by the way, was flagged by 2 separate national security experts as flawed." She lifted the other folder. "This is the updated version, implemented after my intervention. You'll notice the language is tighter, the compliance structure stronger, and, surprise, the Senate approved it with bipartisan support." She stared into the cameras. "I did my job. I protected Americans. And now, the people who didn't like being questioned are calling it sabotage." She paused. "If being cautious makes me reckless, then maybe Washington has forgotten the difference between a rubber stamp and a spine." Romney's camp tried to issue a follow-up quote that night, but it barely made a dent. The media had already run the full comparison. Karoline's revision had strengthened national security, not undermined it. Fox News labeled Romney's last move an act of desperation. MSNBC, reluctantly, called her response bulletproof. Even CNN ran the quote, "rubber stamp or a spine," on repeat. Brian sat beside her on the couch that night, exhausted but impressed. "You realize you just broke the mold, right?" Karoline looked over at him, calm. "No," she said. "I just reminded them what integrity looks like. 3 days after the national security leak fizzled, Karoline Leavitt walked into the Russell Senate office building, unannounced. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she passed stunned aides and interns whispering her name. She didn't stop, didn't blink. She knew exactly where she was going. Mitt Romney's door was slightly ajar. His assistant, startled, stood to intercept her. "He's in a meeting." Karoline held up a White House clearance badge. "He's about to have a more important one." Without waiting for approval, she stepped in. Romney sat at a conference table with 2 staffers and a binder of papers. He looked up, visibly startled. "Ms. Leavitt." She closed the door behind her. "This won't take long, Senator." Romney leaned back, stiff. "If this is about the coverage..." "It's about the truth," she said, placing a printed packet on the table. "This is the revised DHS memo you tried to paint as reckless. It was signed off by your own committee, and you know it." Romney eyed the packet but didn't touch it. Karoline stepped closer, voice even. "You tried to sell me out, not because I broke the rules, but because I didn't play by yours. You smeared my name, leaked lies, and underestimated me." Romney's jaw tightened. "You're impulsive, emotional, unseasoned." "No," she snapped. "I'm unafraid. That's the part that scares you." The room fell silent. "I'm not here to beg for respect," she continued. "I earned it. In front of the cameras, in front of the press, and in front of the American people." She leaned forward, placing both hands on the table, the same way she had in that private GOP meeting. "You don't get to define my service. You don't get to decide how long my voice matters. And you sure as hell don't get the last word." Romney sat still, blinking slowly. The first time in weeks he had nothing to say. Karoline turned toward the door, then paused. "You once said Trump didn't belong in politics," she said over her shoulder. "But maybe it's you who doesn't belong anymore." She walked out, leaving the door open behind her. By the end of the day, the moment had gone viral. A photo snapped by a staffer. Karoline walking out of Romney's office, head high, eyes steady. Caption, "She went in." He stayed silent. Conservative media called it the end of Romney's influence. Even some liberals nodded. You don't have to agree with her to see she crushed him. That evening, Karoline stood at the White House podium one last time that week. "I didn't ask for this fight," she told the press. "But I didn't run from it either. If defending the truth means breaking a few tables, I'll keep breaking them." She smiled, calm, unapologetic. "I won't be bullied. I won't be bought. And I won't be quiet." Behind the scenes, Trump called her personally. "You made history, Karoline," he said. "Now get ready. They're going to come harder." She smiled, gripping the phone. Let them try. Because Karoline Leavitt wasn't just surviving Washington anymore. She was leading it. In a town built on whispers and handshakes behind closed doors, Karoline Leavitt didn't just raise her voice, she slammed her truth onto the table. They told her to wait her turn. She made her own. They tried to sideline her with age, tradition, and power plays. But she didn't just survive the storm. She became it. Mitt Romney thought he could bury her with backroom leaks and press smears. What he didn't expect was a 27-year-old who came armed with facts, fire, and fearlessness. One by one, she dismantled every attack, live, unfiltered, and with the whole nation watching. And in the end, it wasn't Karoline who blinked. It was the system. This wasn't just a political spat. It was a power shift. From the old guard to a new generation that won't apologize for standing firm, won't retreat under pressure, and won't be told to sit down. Karoline Leavitt didn't ask for permission. She made history without it.